The Botswana Business Expectation Survey that was released at the end of last year had a very bullish view with respect to economic performance for the country, really coming through 2022. Are we seeing these materialize? What are your expectations for GDP growth in Botswana this year?
The Business Expectation Survey did paint quite a positive picture over the course of this year. And I think part of it has to do with the timing of the release of that survey. So this is just post our state of emergency. Restrictions were starting to be eased and businesses were starting to see some return to normality. So the expectations painted quite a positive view in terms of economic activity this year. Although nothing to the extent that we saw last year. And that's due to the significant contraction that we saw in 2020. And due to that contraction, we expect Botswana to actually have registered quite a significant rebound over the course of last year. Although data to support this statement is still slow in coming. The fourth quarter GDP figures have been delayed due to the ongoing census in Botswana currently. But that doesn't also hold back from the fact that businesses do anticipate that the restrictions that we saw playing out over the last 2 years shouldn't be as severe or as detrimental to economic activity this year. In our own expectation, we do expect Botswana to register a growth rate of around 4.2%, coming off a high base of around 12.1% currently in our expectations.
For 2021.
For 2021.
But now on that point, a lot of that growth last year, like you said, is rebounding from a contraction. And we can imagine that that has been anchored based on the mining sector performance. We've seen diamond prices doing quite well, both on the polished and unpolished side. Is there an expectation that growth will be the same across other sectors within the economy?
The expectation is mainly based on mining, as you say. And over the course of this year, that won't change. I think mining activity will continue to support Botswana quite significantly. Although, on the other hand, we are expecting ERTP, our Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, to actually gain quite a lot of traction this year. So that's because of the funding that we've seen come through over the second half of last year, as well as also an increase in terms of development spending that's expected from the government side over the course of this year.
So based on ERTP, what sector is being targeted over the next few years for consistent growth? Are we talking about the energy sector? Are we talking about water? What is your expectation for growth and from which sectors will it stem?
The key one is agriculture. So I think the pandemic showed how food insecure Botswana is. And to try and support growth within the agricultural sector, the government has come out with a few policies, some unpopular, which include import substitution in terms of trying and build capacity around local production. So in order to also support local farmers, there's an intention from government side to also improve access to some of these farming areas. So we're talking about road infrastructure being put in, electricity infrastructure as well as ICT to also try and get the youth to participate within agriculture in some of these remote areas.
But Homo, so this point or this policy that was effectively enacted to protect local farmers in the local agricultural sector, as you're well aware, has also had some negative externalities with respect to import prices coming in. And so there's been this consistent narrative from a lot of clients stating that prices have actually shot up, not just in the agricultural sector, but also within, broader general price levels. Are you seeing this play out with respect to CPI figures? And, what's your expectation for inflation in the country?
The mere fact that these policies had to be put into place to restrict importation highlights how local prices for certain fruit and veg is actually higher than what we get from the likes of South Africa or Namibia. So there has been an inflationary impact in terms of the food basket locally. But as to the general increase that we're also seeing within other sectors, that's as a result of some changes that we saw take effect, such as electricity prices being hiked up, water prices, including rental prices also being hiked up over the course of last year. And over and above that, we've seen international oil prices also tick up, and our local energy regulator has also had to respond by increasing local fuel prices. And these have obviously had an impact in terms of business costs. So operating costs have increased, and as a result, some businesses have indeed passed those on to consumers.
So we saw inflation. It's actually printed over 10% for 2 months now, if I'm not mistaken. What do you think this translates to monetary policy? Is there now an expectation for higher interest rate environment in Botswana for the rest of the year?
We do expect the central bank to hike the policy rate, and we've held this view for some time. I think what's now coming into question is the degree or the extent of that hiking cycle. So we have the central bank indicating that they seek to implement certain changes to the monetary policy framework, and these would also affect the ability to be able to hike, because obviously it's a new framework, or there are changes to the framework, and we do expect that there'll be an element of monitoring the effectiveness of these changes in the market.